right. So, firstly, thanks to all the participants for joining in today. It's a weekend, Saturday evening. So, I think all of you have joined. This clearly indicates to me that all of you are really serious about creating wealth. So, thank you so much for joining in. Before we start the session today, I take this opportunity to thank all the viewers and all the associates who have been associated with us. I'm glad to share that we have now more than 5,000 investors who have been associated with us so far in last 1 year. So I remember when we started this business last year, I had this clear agenda in my mind that we want to empower the investor community with more knowledge. I mean, especially when I see my career and look back, I come from very small city and come from very humble background. Thanks to my father who helped me to, complete my post graduation from Pune, and based on the studies and whatever little that I could do in my career is only because of the education that I got. So our ambition and my ambition was very very clear that we would like to empower and educate as many investors as we can. And our first milestone, I would say, was achieved when we had more than 5,000 attendees who have attended our webinars or have been associated with us. So once again, I would like to thank all the participants, all the audience for joining in. This really makes us even more responsible and encourage my team to organize more knowledge-based sessions like this. So once again, thank you so much, participants, and thank you so much for having trust on us. Now we'll move on to the topic today. So today we've invited Mayur from Anand Rathi Advisors. All of you might be knowing Anand Rathi because they have a very strong presence as far as broking business is concerned, and it's a decade of history. Where they've been very good at in terms of executing the transaction on their broking platform. And they are also known for they are one of the largest wealth management firm in India. They are known for their wealth advisory. And apart from that, what I get to know when I interact with people from Anand Rathi is that now the clearly the focus has been shifted to asset management business as well, since they bring a lot of capabilities, institutional capabilities and research capabilities on the table. They decided that they would continue to build their asset management piece as well. So the Anand Rathi advisors started this business somewhere at about 2016 or so, and they have been running a couple of portfolios. There are three portfolios they've been running, and today we've invited Mayur Shah to understand more from him in terms of how does he construct the portfolio. So Mayur, let me take a minute quickly to introduce Mayur. Mayur has over 15 years of experience, and he has been working with Anand Rathi since 2007. So I think in the early stage of his career, he joined a large organization like Anand Rathi and grown many folds in terms of his career. And after spending now 8 years, he is now heading the fund management team out there. He's head of equities there, managing all the portfolios. Particularly, we thought we'll discuss more about one of their thematic portfolio, which is MNC portfolio. So we thought particularly we'll try and understand how these big MNCs, so-called conglomerates in India, how do they sort of operate? What are their uniqueness, and should we really consider should we really consider investing in those companies? So welcome on the show of Ask the Expert, Mayur.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Vikas ji.
Yeah. So it is our pleasure to have you on this show called Ask the Expert. See, let me just take a minute quickly to tell you the format of the show. So the format of the show is very, very simple. We invite industry experts like you. We shoot questions on behalf of our investors, sometimes difficult questions, sometimes easy question. And the whole idea of, asking this question is to try and answer, their questions, and we try and understand their situation, when it comes to investing, what should be the best advice. So what disclaimer here, whatever stocks that Mayur is going to talk about, before you invest there or before you invest in PMS, please either consult with us or you consult with your investment advisor, and just don't go and make investments there. So Mayur, if you could uh, quickly introduce yourself and the company, or talk about what's your stock selection process which you follow, or which you want your team and analysts to follow in your organization? How do you look at that? And then we'll go to other questions.
Correct. Correct. Do you want me to share the presentation also in between? Is
Yeah,
that fine?
if you wish to, yeah, you have a right. Let me share the rights with you. Uh, you want to put a PPT?
Yeah, yeah. Maybe in between, whatever many doubts get clear from the PPT itself.
Sure. Okay. You can do so now.
Right. So before jumping on to the presentation part and everything, I will try to cut it short and I will make it very crisp so that we can answer many questions. But before that, let me introduce myself. I've been part of Anand Rathi Group from 2007. Worked in various vertical. I was part of wealth management product team for 2 years, and then subsequently got into product development and product management. And finally, from last 8 years, I've been part of the portfolio management department. And last 4 years back, I've got an opportunity to be a fund manager. So I'm managing the two schemes within Anand Rathi Group. One is MNC PMS and another is Impress portfolio. So right now, I'm going to speak more about this one of the unique theme, the MNC portfolio, which is there. And just to give you like why it is always important to try and understand each and every product, because by the name PMS, it's very difficult to understand what is the underlying objective philosophy of that fund, because each and every portfolio manager will have their own risk adjusted parameters that they have set across. If they are taking a higher risk, then people do expect higher return, and if you are taking little lesser risk, then even a reasonable return is also okay, because different set of clients do attract to get different kinds of investment because the objectives are different. So let me first start with very quickly some key objectives of why we have chosen this multinational companies portfolio and what is the uniqueness of the same. Is the presentation visible?
Yeah, it is.
Fine. So just to give one clarity, like by name MNC, people do get confused, like are we investing into Google, Amazon or Facebook? That is not the case. We are only investing into Indian listed companies, okay, whereby the promoter holding, the promoter group is sitting outside India. They are controlling the show. We have a foreign promoter who is actually controlling the show. So this is one clarity that everyone needs to keep in mind. We are very much focusing on India growth story. We are not moving out from the India growth story. So that is where the focus is. So many names are there in front of you, like companies like Hindustan Unilever, Maruti Suzuki, Nestle, Britannia, Bata, Colgate. So all these have foreign promoters who are running the show. So that is where we are investing into. Why we have chosen this particular theme, many of you must be already knowing it. These are tried and tested business model. We can safely rely on these companies. These are not like fly by night of kind of a company. They have a strong business model, multi-decade experience they are having, and they are always ahead of the curve because they spend a lot of money in R&D, technology, and brand building. So that is where they get always a key advantage in compared to the other players in the market. Second important advantage is in terms of corporate governance standards. Very rarely we have find any kind of corporate mismanagement or fraud in multinational companies which are listed in India. I'm not saying a foreign player cannot do any fraud or mismanagement, but you can imagine a size of a company with multiple economies and geographies they are catering to. They are very unlikely to have any kind of practices which can impact their global brand image. So their corporate governance standard is quite high. If you look at the balance sheet strength, most of the MNC companies which are listed in India are debt-free company, cash-rich company. Their cash flows are positive, and their working capital management, with limited number of assets and limited working capital, they are able to generate higher turnover, and that is the reason their return ratios are quite superior. And this is becomes more important because when times are challenging, markets are pessimistic, cycles are down, and when there is a strength in the balance sheet, it really helps you to overcome those challenges, and when market recovers, they are the first one to recover. Also, some special opportunities keeps on coming to these multinational companies because of high cash flows in their books. They are cash rich company, and they easily becomes the takeover candidates by global giants which are there. And many a time promoter themselves are looking how they can increase their own shareholding from the public, and in bargain they have to come out with the delisting offers, and this always helps the shareholders value enhancing. MNC, whether MNC as a theme will work or not. So before starting with this portfolio, we have done a lot of brainstorming also, and we had done one analysis, like how we have Nifty index. We similarly have Nifty MNC index also. And over the last 15 years, what we have seen, Nifty MNC index has been able to beat the Nifty index, or at least they have been at par with the Nifty index. But what is more important is the consistency. So if you look at the average 3-year rolling return over the last 15 years, Nifty MNC index is having better rolling return in compared to Nifty index. So that shows the consistency. And if you look at the volatility, the annual volatility of Nifty MNC index is better compared to Nifty index. So although this portfolio is as good as kind of a large cap, I can say in terms of risk level, it is on a lower side. Still, it has a tendency that yes, we can able to beat the Nifty over the longer run period, or at least be at par with the Nifty index. Now, why this becomes much more critical? Many people do ask the question like, the risk and reward is very much reasonable. I can say, okay, if you are looking at somewhere, the returns are which is very much reasonable as compared to the broader market. But just to give you an example, there are many clients when they invest, they are very cautious about the portfolio. They are very conservative in their investment. They want to put money into equity, but because of the experience, they might be having some bad experience in mind and they are not putting money over there.
Yeah, I was coming to that. Yeah.
Right,
so what we'll do is, once your presentation is over, I have few questions for you.
No problem. Yeah. No problem. Definitely, I will try to address the same. So just quickly, maybe stocks that are there as of now, the part of the portfolio, it's a multi-cap style portfolio, large cap, mid cap, small cap. We invest in all the three categories, but maximum stocks are into large cap. And it's very well diversified portfolio, except for banking stocks, banking and financials. Most of the other sectors are getting covered in this particular portfolio. So right now, 18 stocks are there, part of the portfolio. We go maximum to 20. 20 is the maximum limit we keep. And this is the performance so far in front of you. It's pretty slow and steady, but a decent return, I can say. We have started in March 2018. So you must have seen in 2018, there was a broader market correction. And again, there was a COVID correction in 2020 also. So it's a pretty linear return that what investor has made. So objective of this fund was also to have a portfolio with a limited risk on the downside, or we can reduce the risk as much as possible. And the client should be able to make a sustainable, a decent return over the longer run period. So this is it about, maybe if you have any more questions, queries,
sure.
Definitely we can take one by one on the same.
Yeah. So the first question is, why only MNC companies and not other companies trading on exchange? I mean,
okay.
As far as
right.
Yeah.
Fine. So definitely there are, I think, more than 4,500 companies which are listed on exchange at this point of time. And every theme or the philosophy when we have designed, it is based on an objective. So in this particular portfolio, our objective was very clear that we wanted to have a moderate to conservative portfolio with a lesser drawdown. The risk level should be on the lower side, and a reasonable return should be made by the client. So that was the focus over here. And after doing a lot of brainstorming and understanding and some key benefits, advantage, what these MNC companies by default possess, because any fund manager will have their own filtration criteria. So they will have their own parameters to identify the universe of stock. And over here, the universe of our stock became very narrow down when we chose an MNC. It is just 90 stocks that we are focusing upon. I'm not saying the other stocks are not good enough in the market. There are many good stocks are there. But when our universe is very clear and our strategy is very much focused, then your decision becomes making much more easier over here.
You are saying that there are only 90 companies which are listed now, as far as
right. So as per the definition that we have kept, like the promoter holding should be having a substantial say in the market. Promoter could be 40%, 50%. So he is having a control on that particular company, or the technology or managerial know-how. The technology has been brought from outside and he is having an equal say in that particular company. So that is what we are looking at. So we are not
examples of that. Sorry, I'm keep disturbing you and asking you these questions because investors are keen to know about that. Yeah.
Right.
So can you give some examples?
for the companies that we have invested in.
You talked about the 40%, 50%, 40% stake and 60%.
Right. So in our company, so now the first company in our portfolio, the top 10 stocks that you must have seen, like KSB Limited is there. So KSB Pump is into pumps and valves. They're a German company, and it's a small cap company in Indian market, but globally within their own market space, they are the leader where they are actually catering to. And 40% is there with the promoter group over here. If you look at Maruti Suzuki, 50% is there with Suzuki Motors, which is a Japanese company over there. Same way Hindustan Unilever. So Unilever is a parent company over here. Same way Nestle, ABB, Siemens, Grindwell, Norton. So given by this nature, we have close to around 90 companies which is having at least 1,000 crore plus market cap. So what we are doing, we are not going below 1,000 crore market cap any company. So about 1,000 crore market cap, we have this universe of close to around 90 odd companies where we are actually filtering into, and out of that we try to figure out, okay, which are the best 20 companies we want to keep.
So essentially you are saying that these companies have more than 50% ownership in the businesses. Is that
50% controlling stake? Basically we are looking at a controlling stake. A single promoter is having a controlling stake. Let's say HDFC or ICICI Bank, they might be having a foreign shareholding, but they are not the promoter. There are multiple FIs who are holding HDFC Bank, multiple FIs holding ICICI Bank also. Therefore, FI holdings might be much higher, but they are not the promoter. They are not the controlling part. So we are looking at the promoter group who is having the say in the company and they are running the show.
Yeah, I remember one of the portfolio manager, he mentioned categorically that, as an Indian, we don't have enough exposure in our own bank, HDFC, which has been growing for over 27 years, for more than 20 years, CAGR returns. Despite all that, if you look at the shareholding pattern, MNCs, I mean, the FII seems to have more exposure in HDFC than the domestic participation.
Right.
So thank you so much for clarifying that. The other question is, generally, I mean, this is my observation. I saw that MNC companies are always traded at a very, very high P. Even today, when you look at an approach, most of these MNC companies are at all-time high in terms of their Ps. So what is the logic behind it? I wanted to know more from you, and if you could share this for the benefit of our viewers. What is the reason why MNC companies are always considered to be the higher P? I don't say expensive, but high P stocks.
Correct. So this is the common, I can say, this phenomena of higher PE is not a recent phenomena. It's been there from quite a long time. If you look at from last 20 years, okay, these stocks have been always trading on a higher side. The PE multiple, whenever you compare to the similar sector or similar peer group kind of a company within domestic companies, domestic driven company, you will always find MNCs are always getting a better PE valuation. And fortunately, I can say right now, over the last 6 to 7 years, it is now that higher PE kind of a concept is now not restricted to multinational companies. We are now seeing many Indian companies also, be it like Asian Paint, Pidilite, is there, Astral Poly is there, many of this Havells, Polycab, V-Guard Industries, the consumer driven companies which are there, or paint companies which are there, who have B2C kind of a business model. Many companies are now getting this higher kind of a PE. So now the reason for this PE and why PE is getting at such a higher valuation, whether it's justified or not. There are different parameters we look at in trying to identify why a company should be getting a higher PE. One simple parameter everyone knows is, yes, the companies which are having a higher growth rate, then definitely it will have a higher PE. But over and above the growth rate that we look at, there are almost 6-7 parameters that we look at. One is, yes, the balance sheet is having debt or not, whether the balance sheets are leveraged. If the balance sheet is not leveraged, cash flows are positive always, we will tend to give them a higher PE. We look at the corporate governance standard. If the corporate governance standard is good, the management quality is good, then definitely we will like to give that particular company a higher PE. If the company is into very niche business model, it's not a generic business model, it's a niche business model, then definitely that business model will always attract a higher PE valuation. If the company is the leader in its own market, he's having the maximum market share, or he's in the number 1, 2, or 3 kind of a category, again that business will get track a higher PE. So even if the growth is coming at 10, 12, 15%, but still because of the confidence of the investors on those set of companies, we are ready to pay them a higher PE valuation. Something very much similar is like when you are buying a property, you have a choice. You can buy a property in very posh area, or you can buy a property in a remote area with the same area, with the same size of the property, but in a posh area you are ready to pay a better price for that particular property, because you are having a sense of safety, social security is there. So that is why you are paying that kind of money for that particular property over there. So something similar happens for these companies also. If investors have confidence in these set of companies, then definitely they are putting more valuation to these set of companies.
Sure. And Mayur, you've been evaluating all these MNC companies. What are the two, three traits that you might have observed while evaluating maybe their business model, or maybe their compliance, regulatory requirement or compliance department? I mean, I also have had an opportunity to work with one of the multinational banks in India.
Yeah.
And what I've realized is that when it comes to compliance, they are ahead of anybody else.
Right.
So what do you think, if you could highlight this for the benefit of our viewers, 2-3 traits about MNCs?
No, definitely. So one best part of all these MNC companies, like in terms of corporate governance standard, basically the compliance part actually comes under subject of corporate governance standard only. But if you look at these companies, they don't have to follow only Indian rules and regulations. The Indian company law, the RBI, the FEMA, the SEBI is there, they are catering to, but from the country from where they are originating, the promoter group, because they are again answerable to the promoter, they are answerable to the shareholders in their own parent country also, from they are coming. So even they have to look at the rules, guidelines and regulation from that angle also. So there is always a dual check in these multinational companies in terms of their rules, regulations, their regulatory framework, the internal monetary control system, how they are actually laying down their foundation basically. And they have hired professionals at multiple levels to run their business, and they are very crystal clear, like they don't want to have any kind of damage on their brand image. So they are very particular in terms of the compliance and regulatory requirements. Very simple, I can say. Even in our broking industry, just to give you an example of our broking industry, there are many foreign multinational banks, I can say, who are there in India. Not a bank, maybe a financial institution, maybe Deutsche is there, Citibank is there, who are doing business in India. If you are an employee of Deutsche and Citibank, if you want, they normally restrict you to have a trading and demat account. They will not tell you you don't have to do trading at all. So that kind of restriction and compliance is there. If you are there, if you found guilty, then they will throw you out basically from that particular company. Something, if you are an Indian company, if you are working in an Indian broking then there is no restriction that you can't have a trading and demat account of your own. But yes, maybe 6 months holding period or 1 year holding period of the stock minimum has to be there. So I'm just trying to give you a sense like what kind of regulatory and restriction these companies do put when they are running the show within the domestic industry, because they are very particular. They never want to get any impact on their brand image. That is there definitely.
Yeah. So what would be the market cap of overall MNCs put together in India?
All the companies you are talking about?
Yeah.
I have not compared all the companies put together, but definitely there are, I can say, more than, I can say, top 50 companies which are there. They are all above, I can say, 15,000-20,000 crore market cap. Out of the 90 companies which are there, so around 10,000-15,000 crore plus kind of a market cap, and many blue chip companies which are part of index also, like Hindustan Lever is there, Nestle is there, even this ACC, Ambuja Cement. These are all multinationals basically which are there. Bosch, Abbott, many. I can say most of them are on the large cap space, the top category, the top 50 stocks which are there in of the 90 that we have identified.
Yeah, one of the observation is I saw Bata also in your list. Is that you consider that as an MNC or?
Yeah, it's very much multinational companies. You can go and check their shareholding pattern also. So people do get confused with Bata, they confused with Maruti also. because they have been seeing this company from ages. Even maybe Hindustan Unilever, the name Hindustan is there, but many people do get confused and like they think it's pretty much an Indian company, but they do belong from outside. So Bata is a giant, I can say, in that footwear space. More than 120 plus companies they are operating into right now at this point of time. So it's pretty much a foreign company.
Yeah, and most of the these MNC companies have not listed in India. So that also we were looking at other day. The universe is very large. So what do you think, they will eventually will be getting listed, or how is it? Like for example, in car segment you have Hyundai, which is
Right.
one of the largest player, but not listed yet.
Okay, what I have observed, like the universe of these multinational companies which are there in India, is to a certain extent they have got narrowed down over the period of time. Let's take an example. Let's say Cadbury. So Cadbury was listed in India way back in 2003. It got delisted, and Mondelez took over that particular company, and now, but you can imagine what kind of business these companies having in Indian market. Same way Johnson is there, Johnson and Johnson. Again, very good business model. Same way like you told about Hyundai also. So what I have seen, all these companies when they have earlier came to Indian market, like be it Hindustan Unilever or Nestle is there or Abbott is there, these companies wanted to have an Indian partner. Okay, and maybe I can say maybe some policies and regulatory framework was also there. If you are coming and doing business in India, then you need to have an Indian partner along with you. So that was the challenge. Over the period of time, that restriction is now no more, I can say. So if the foreign player thinks, okay, I want to have a complete control of that particular company, then they will come and give you that delisting offers also. Okay, we want to delist, and this is the offer price that we are giving it to the public. So earlier that regulatory framework which was there, which is not there right now. So if you can have complete ownership outside India, as well as you can come in India and do the business also. There is no restriction that you need to compulsory have the Indian partner. Although there was certain restriction in the retail side, maybe like Walmart and all these companies were trying earlier, and there was some talks were going on whether Bharti Airtel was in talks with Walmart, because they in certain segments still there was some restriction. Maybe like let's say insurance company also. Over the period of time now, the insurance more and more now government has opened up the avenue that yes, FDI can come in on that insurance segment also. It was just because of the regulatory framework, the Indian partners were there, the Indian shareholders were there earlier. Now once the each and every sector gets opened up by the government, then you will see a foreign player can directly come in Indian market and do a business without having shareholders, without having any public holding in the same.
So what are the 2-3 things that you look at when you pick them up in your portfolio?
Right. So as far as the strategy goes, so one part is there, like the universe is very narrow. That is around 90 stocks. And in each and every sector, we have 2 or 3 leader companies which are there. And our portfolio, how we have designed it, we need to have one section which is called as consumer non-discretionary, because that is one bigger chunk where even the biggest of the companies are there. Hindustan Lever, Nestle, Colgate, Glaxo Consumer. And when we look at the pharma companies also, like Pfizer is there, Sanofi, AstraZeneca. So this one particular space we always want to have in our portfolio, because this portfolio is meant to be little moderate to conservative risk reward strategy. And without having this FMCG and pharma, I cannot imagine to have a conservative portfolio to a certain extent. So that is where, so we try to figure out, okay, who are the leaders in this particular space. And even if these companies are growing at the rate of 10-12% also, still we would like to continue with that particular company, that because these companies provide me enough stability in this particular space that is there. So, and whatever additional alpha creation that I want to do in my portfolio in terms of actual identification of the stock, right? Like how do we identify the stocks and everything. So that is where the cyclical, consumer discretionary and industrial cap goods kind of a company comes into picture. So that is where the alpha or the kicker is coming in. So when we try to figure out, okay, which are the companies that we want to get into in terms of financial number crunching, what is more important is, yes, the balance sheet strength that has to be there. So within that balance sheet strength, there are a lot many parameters are there. The working capital and the asset turnover. This is one of the key parameters that we always look at. If the company is able to maintain their net working capital to sales kind of a ratio, if it is sustainable, okay, and if they are able to manage their margins, the operating margins are also being able to maintain over the longer period of time, and the cash flows. We don't want any companies to have a back-to-back cash flow negative. If the cash flow is going negative just because of capex, then it's okay. If it is not because of capex, still it is going negative, then something is wrong with their working capital management. So that is the prima facie in terms of the number crunching that we try to look at. But over and above that, yes, the subjective element always take over that. What is the underlying sector looking like? Whether the economy is getting into recovery mode or the euphoria or the bull phase of the market, then definitely we would like to add upon to this industrial, cap goods, engineering kind of companies which are there, the cyclical companies. But whenever we see, okay, the economy is not doing good, there is some pessimism, some recessionary trend is setting in, then we would like to shift some of our exposure from this aggressive sector to the defensive sectors. So that is the normal strategy we play between defensive and aggressive, because most of the companies, that out of the 90 companies also, we like 50 companies, and they are equally good in their own space. So there is no question of choice like why one company and why not another company. All are good. It is only between whether we want to go more into defensive at this point of time, or we want to play the recovery of the market. Let us go aggressive over here.
Yeah, but I just looked at your portfolio, the top 10 holdings that you, at a prima facie, I could be wrong, but don't you think it looks very defensive? So do you think it can really deliver and outperform the Nifty over a period of 2-3 years?
Right. So from last 3 years, we have been able to beat the benchmark, our own MNC index, and even our Nifty index also. So Nifty MNC index as well as Nifty index, last 3 years Nifty CAGR return is close to around 13.5%, and we have got somewhere close to around 14% plus. So our strategy is very clear. So we do always have some mid caps and small caps as a part of our overall portfolio, because that helps us to give us an additional trigger. We did participate in one of the company, that was GMM Fodder. Earlier when we took, no one was talking about that company, but last 1.5 years, everywhere it was there in the news about that company. We made an exit at 4400 level. So we had bought it around 1100. At that point of time, even the liquidity was an issue in that company, but the company had a good, strong future outlook based on the business that was driven from chemicals and the pharma companies. So we got into that company. We made very good return with that small cap company. And even if you look at right now, the cap goods and the engineering space is now showing the recovery space. The KSB Limited, Grindwell, Norton, again, these are the companies now, because of the infrastructure movement that has started in the market, we are seeing a lot of traction coming in for these businesses. Even the industrial automation kind of a business, like companies into Siemens, Honeywell Automation, these companies generally tend to perform when the economic cycles turn around. So we have enough growth triggers at this point of time in the portfolio. Although the names that you have seen earlier, like Hindustan Lever, Nestle, Abbott, Pfizer, although it looks defensive, but we try to balance out the proportion between defensives and the aggressive. So this is one particular space. Over the last 6 months, we have changed the strategy from defensives to aggressive, and that is where we are seeing the last 6-7 months also the momentum is maintained in the portfolio. So this is what we are trying to look at, slow and steady, but yes, a decent return upside would always be there. And there are many growth triggers. There are many companies in, I can say, small cap space we have not added. There are a lot of potential over there also. So if time demands, if situation demands, definitely we can add those companies in that mid cap and small cap. Very good companies, I can say.
Yeah. No, why I was asking you is because when I was growing up, in my early stage of my career, so I discussed with one of the famous portfolio manager, and he said, "कुछ समझ नहीं आ रहा है ना विकास, तो MNC ले लेने का." So these companies have 40-50 years of track record of operating from India, and they've been doing very well. Their EBITDA margins have been very, very consistent. They are able to project and predict the sales more efficiently than anybody else, and they were the one who actually adopted the technology first. So therefore, I was curious to know, nothing else. So, okay. So how did this portfolio perform when last year market fell down by 27% due to COVID-19? And how did this come back?
Yeah. So definitely the portfolio was designed in such a manner to have a lesser drawdown. Okay, whenever the volatility increases in the market, the risk factor increases. The objective was very much set. Okay, the fall has to be lesser, and that was proven actually last year itself. That was that we are talking about in March 2020, when market the indices fall due because of the COVID crisis. Nifty was down by close to around 25% in one single month, whereas our MNC PMS was just down by 14%. So you can imagine almost 11% alpha was getting created on the drawdown when the markets did fall. So this is just shows like the volatility, the risk factor is relatively lower in this portfolio. However, the same happens on the upside also. When the market recovers, then yes, the aggressive sectors tends to recover much more faster. But our MNC will recover slow and steadily. It is on its own basically. You have no need to worry about this particular portfolio. Half of the portfolios are legacy kind of a stock, so you can safely rely on that. And it becomes very much important. Because why I'm saying that, when at the time of need the money should be available. This people don't understand. Although we always tell, okay, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years you put money into equity, you will always make money. That is true. Everyone will make money if their investment horizon is more than 3 to 4 years plus. You can imagine a person who had just invested in a portfolio. After 1 year, due to some emergency, he is in badly need of money, and at the same time market falls badly. So at the same, so he's under dilemma like what to do, whether I need to book losses, take out my money, or from where to get the money. If he has put in certain money into certain investments like MNC kind of a portfolio, the drawdown would be lesser, and if at the time of need that money could be easily pulled out. So that is the basic objective. So it is not always the return is mattering, but sometimes risk also equally matters when you are investing money. That is why you put money into FDs, bond also. Why you are not putting all money into equities? Because you try to diversify your overall portfolio, and this is what this MNC portfolio actually helps to diversify your equity portfolio, and at time of need it definitely helps you out.
All right, so last question from my end, then we'll move on to question and answer. So I would request all the participants to write their questions in Q&A box, and then I'll be shooting those questions to Mayur.
Right.
So Mayur, last question is, what kind of investors you think should be investing in MNC PMS portfolio of yours? Because there are other thematic mutual funds also available in the same segment. So what kind of investor should they look at investing in your PMS?
Right. So we have always tried and promoted this particular PMS as a part of the overall asset allocation. So if when you are doing your own financial planning, when you are doing your asset allocation, like how much money you want to put into debt, how much money you want to put into equity. Within equity also you have number of alternatives, large cap funds, mid cap, small cap funds, mutual funds are always there. There are people who are doing investment into direct equity also, and we try to do a breakup. So any investor who is having an inclination of having a large cap oriented portfolio, so MNC is the best portfolio that he needs to have. Reason being, this portfolio definitely helps you to diversify your overall risk, because in most of the large cap mutual fund that you must be owning, the top 10 stock, when you look at out of that top 10 stock, except for TCS, Infosys and Reliance, everything would be banking and financial, be it HDFC Bank, ICICI Bank, Axis, Bajaj Finance, those category would be there. If you really want to complement that particular portfolio, try to have MNC as a theme along with that. Because the stocks are different, it doesn't have any banking and financial. And in spite of not having any banking and financials over the last 15 years, even MNC index has been able to deliver equally good return compared to Nifty. And our objective is how we can beat even MNC index. So this is one portfolio which needs to be there in every client's portfolio. If your overall equity portfolio size is more than 2.5 crore, then 50 lakhs, I can say definitely you should consider in this MNC PMS.
Yeah. So a couple of questions from some of our investors. So the first question is from Mr. Arora. Can you ask about Tasty Bite taken over by Mars now? So what is your views?
Can you repeat?
What is your view about Tasty Bite recently been taken over by Mars now?
Okay. So we are not tracking this particular space. We are looking at only on the listed companies which are there into this particular universe at this point of time. Definitely, these kind of acquisition do help to increase the valuations of the similar kind of businesses which are there, which are on the listed space. Definitely.
Okay. The other question is why did you exit from GMM if the prospects looks so promising?
Good question. So I just wanted to give some elaboration on the business model. GMM is into B2B business model. So what do you mean by B2B? So they are not making any products which are getting utilized by the end consumer. They are the corporates, they are the chemical companies, the pharma companies, FMCG companies, which are utilizing their glass line reactors, filtration equipment, mixtures which are there. Now in a B2B business model, okay, they are always capital intensive. So it's very difficult for a company to keep on growing at the rate of 40-50%. It's a small cap company. Why it was getting little premium valuation? Because the user industry was having lot of traction, which was there. And being a market leader within its own space, GMM was having almost 55% plus market share in this glass-line reactor. So when we purchased also at 1,100, the stock was trading at around 30 PE. Still, we gone and bought that particular company because the growth was supporting, and side by side, the user industry demand that we were forecasting for the next 2 to 3 years plus was also supporting that the demand is constantly going to be there. Now, over the period of time, I can say not over the period, very short period, within 1 year's time frame, the stock went up from 1,100 to almost 4,000 plus, and at 4,000 plus also it was trading at 100 P. So there was no justification for us like a stock is trading at 100 P with a B2B kind of a business model where the growth rate is not going to be there more than 20-25% unless and until they do any kind of inorganic acquisition. However, those inorganic acquisition would be always challenged with given the valuation at what the current price that the stock is trading at. So we did a partial exit at 2,500, at 3,700, at 4,400. We completely moved out. No doubt from that 4,400 also it went up to 7,000 later on. And to your knowledge, the foreign promoter itself find it too exorbitant valuation. He came out with an OFS, open offer, at a price of 3,500. So you can imagine even the foreign player who was an investor in this company, he made an exit at that valuation. No doubt the company's growth model is strong, the user industry demand is strong, but sometimes even valuation becomes important. Something similar we have done it with Abbott Laboratory also. We have done a partial profit booking at around 1,800 zone, and we have reduced our weightage. So whenever we find the valuation becoming too aggressive or the stock weightage in my portfolio has become too high, we always try to reduce the gains over there, the profits. We try to book profits and do an exit. So
yeah, I think he's saying that Tasty Bite is listed. They make some organic food consumers, consumable items. Tasty Bite.
I need to check about the same because maybe it might not be coming under this multinational earlier.
Less than 1,000 crores of market cap. It might
be.
Yeah,
that's why. So below 1,000 crore market cap.
So your universe is above 1,000 crores. Yes. Okay. All right. The second question is from Mr. Malviya. Is this the right time to invest in PMS given the large ticket size and current rally which happened in the markets in last 2-3 months time?
Right. Actually, we missed out on the market outlook. Maybe most of you must be having the similar kind of doubts, like where we are heading in the market at this point of time. Markets are meant to go on a higher side over the longer period. That is the universal thing, because we are into emerging markets at this point of time. Inflation is always going to be supportive for the prices to move on a higher side. You can imagine if the global bankers, the global central bankers, the Indian market, they are infusing liquidity into the system at this point of time in order to revive the growth. Out of all the money that is getting infused into the system, not all the money is pulled back. with more and more money into the system, with inflation always catching up in the market. So ultimate direction for all the asset classes. And if the asset classes are showing growth momentum, then definitely it has to move on a higher side. Now coming to where we are standing at this point of time, no doubt 15,500 plus, the markets always look expensive. Something similar had happened in 2008 also. From in 2008, when correction came from 6,200, we went to almost 2,500 zone. And again, we came back to that 6,200. People were having that apprehension, okay, markets are again at all-time high. What is going to happen? But we have seen markets are making an up move direction. Now, looking at the valuation, the setup at this point of time, Indian markets are going through some challenging phase because of the second wave of COVID. This second and third wave is already being witnessed by the developed world. If you look at the global market, the US market, the European market, they have already gone through that particular phase, and their economies now overshooting growth. Even the inflation is now catching up much faster in the global market at this point of time. So the growth is coming back globally. Maybe in India, it might be little delayed, but yes, the growth will definitely come back once the unlocking happens within the markets. And we are already seeing that kind of a phenomena. Best part is in the current lockdown, the mobility index has not dropped much. In the last year, when we look at the June quarter, there was a complete lockdown. There was no movement happening. At least in this current lockdown, at least the manufacturing setup is working, the exports units are working over here, the mobility is there. There is hardly, I can say, only the people who are onto the direct retail side of non-essential items, the people are into the hotel and tourism kind of an industry. That is where we are seeing the maximum pain over here. Otherwise, I can say 80-85% of the economy is still able to survive in this kind of a lockdown, and they have managed to at least do a decent business over here. Maybe consumer discretionary and luxury. These are the only items which has got impacted. But best part is the capex and the infrastructure side of the activity is still moving on after the budget, what government has given thrust to. And that is what we are seeing in many of the cap good companies also. Companies like L&T, companies like Siemens, ABB, everyone is having very good order book at this point of time. It is just showing that economy is just ready to bloom from the current level. Interest rates are at such a lower level. So this lower interest rate always helps many of the sectors which are interest sensitive. One of the key segment, I can say, real estate. After demonetization, there was complete dryness in real estate prices. Prices were not moving, and slowly and steadily the volumes have also got impacted. But now what we are seeing, with enough liquidity into the system, this one sector has started to show very good momentum traction. And this is very big sector for the economy. Many ancillary sectors are getting benefited with the real estate taking an up move. So real estate, infrastructure, private capex, everything is showing very good picture. If you look at the broader market, over the last 3 years, we have been consolidating and correcting. Just take an example of mid cap and small cap index also here. Small cap index, just 10 to 15 days back, they have managed to come back to their 2018 peak level. Mid cap index, just around 2.5-3 months back, they managed to broke that 2018 peak level, whereas Nifty had already broken their 2018 peak level way back in 2019 itself. So there was a complete divergence between a broader market and few selected stocks which are helping the market to go on a higher side. But now the trend is reversing. Now we are seeing more and more broader participation, which is helping the market to move on a higher side. So there is no need to worry with the valuation at this point of time, because current valuation, we are looking at last 12 months earning. Out of that last 12 months earning, 2 quarters were bad. That was last year's June quarter and last year's September quarter's earnings were bad. So until the time we don't move those 2 quarters from the base, and another 2 quarter gap keeps on getting added, that is current June quarter numbers are out and current September quarters when numbers are out, you will see we are growing. Even if we are in lockdown last year's June, in the current June quarter, whenever numbers would be there, we will see positive growth only, even for the September also. So corporate earnings would be always supportive, sentiments would be always positive, unless and until we don't see any liquidity tightening which is happening globally. That is where the concern is at this point of time, because globally inflation has started to rise, commodity prices are moving up, fuel prices are moving up. but the global central bankers would like to wait for at least 2 to 3 more quarters before taking any measures for liquidity tightening, because they need to see the consistency in the growth, whether this growth of one quarter is sustainable, is going on sustainably or not. There could be always a reason of a pent up demand which has inflated the growth in one quarter. They have to see for the couple of more quarters to make a fruitful decision. Okay, yes, it's time now to go for tightening. So I can say for next 1 year till December at least, there is no need to worry as such. Market will be always supportive. Even if some correction comes, that would be a shallow correction. It's time to be with the market at this point of time.
Sure. The other question is from Mr. Ganpati. Is asking that your company like Abbott and Sanofi, they are also equally good and outstanding companies, but they don't seems to be a part of your portfolio.
Abbott is very much their part of our portfolio. Sanofi is also their part of our portfolio. Earlier, we had reduced our weightage in defensive. So right now we only have Pfizer and Abbott, but we did participate in Sanofi. We got really good dividend also last year, almost 6 to 7% dividend yield that Sanofi had declared. So companies are good, many companies are there, but we try to balance out the portfolio between aggressive to defensive. If we think, okay, we need to increase the allocation of defensive, then yes, Sanofi definitely comes into picture after Pfizer and Abbott. Definitely that is a candidate.
Sure. So other question, interesting question from Mr. Devendra. He wants to know, do you see any kind of competition from local players to MNCs in near future? The way, government of India is talking about sharpening the skill set of the employees, or talking about adopting the new technologies. And these Indian entrepreneurs are also emerging as, one of the largest players in their segments. For example, you look at Reliance or you look at any other company. So you think that there's going to be a big competition for these MNCs to operate in India?
It's definitely, competition is always going to be there for any company, whether it's MNC or within the Indian domestic company also. But the multinational companies which are operating in India, just to give you an example, they are pretty much Indian, I can say. These companies are having manufacturing setup also in India. Their end consumer market is also in India. So we are not going away from the market of Indian markets. Even their employee set, the skill set that you are talking about, everything is, they are actually utilizing India's skill set only. It's not that they are going outside India. What they bring is the global technology which a foreign player, at their parent company or any other group subsidiary company would have invented, and that added advantage comes to the Indian market. So that is where the edge is coming. I can just to give you an example now. Take an example of companies like Siemens, ABB, and now take an example of L&T. So L&T is definitely a giant in its own space. The scale of operation what L&T does definitely cannot be matched with Siemens India or ABB India. Siemens globally, yes, Siemens globally must be having a much bigger valuation, much bigger business that they are doing. I'm talking about the Indian player. But within India, wherever these MNC company feels, okay, if there is too much of competition intensity, there is no more value added over there. They always try to upgrade themselves. They are not even worried about to leave away any certain set of business. Like Siemens and ABB, long back, they have moved out from this infrastructure side of the business. They have now gone into more into automation kind of a business. So that is where the differentiating factor comes. If they find the business are becoming too competitive, the margins are getting squeezed, then definitely they would like to let go those kind of a business and focus on key areas where they can optimize further. So that is the way these MNCs are actually operating the Indian market or any other market across the world.
Understood. So last question, and then I would allow Mr. Divanji to speak, because I think he's raised his hand, so he would like to speak.
Right.
1 second. So last question is, so what's your exit strategy? Is from Mr. Vikas. And what is your churn ratio?
Okay. Within this MNC portfolio, the churn ratio is very low at this point. Last 3 years, average churn ratio is just 28%. So let's say someone who would have invested 1 crore at the beginning of the year, in the entire next 1 year, only 28%, that is only 28 lakhs worth of stock has got changed. So churn ratio is relatively lesser because our universe is also pretty much crisp. and we would like to continue with the companies as far as possible till the time going is good. Now coming to the exit part, like what is the exit strategy? The exit strategy works in three parts basically. One is the company is doing good, the growth is also there. We would definitely like to keep on continuing with that particular company. However, if the weightage in that particular company as far as the overall portfolio weightage goes, so if single stock weightage increases to 9 or 10% in my portfolio, we reduce it back to 6 to 7%. So we go for some partial profit booking, we encash those profit and see to it that the overall portfolio diversification is maintained. So that is one part of exit, that a partial exit. The second part of exit, I have already explained you about the valuation part, like GMM Pfaudler, like how we did an exit, why we moved out from GMM Pfaudler, because the valuation was not supportive enough. Because at certain point, we don't want to go overboard in one of any small or mid cap company with an exorbitant valuation. So we do keep a check on valuation. And third part is, yes, if the company is genuinely not doing good, or the outlook for that company or the outlook for that sector is not looking promising, we do cut allocation. Just to give you past example of our MNC portfolio, way back in 2018, when we started the portfolio, we had close to around 7.5% in Maruti. We had Webco, again into that auto segment, or Webco is into anti-lock braking system for use for commercial vehicles. We had SKF Bearing and Schaeffler India. Again, Schaeffler India was having more exposure to auto. After 3 months, 4 months down the line, after starting up with the portfolio, we realized auto is going for its own challenges. There was a lot of challenge in the auto industry. Then auto was not performing. So after 6 months down the line, we took an action. We reduced the allocation of Maruti, even at loss also. However big the companies, but if the outlook for that company or the sector is not good enough, so we reduced allocation in Maruti. We sold out completely Webco, and out of Schaeffler and SKF, we also moved out of Schaeffler. So these were the decisions that we have taken based on if the outlook is not looking promising for a company or a sector, then definitely we take an exit call. So there is no target or stop loss kind of a thing when we are managing this particular portfolio. It's all about valuation, the weightage in that particular stock, and then the outlook of that particular stock, which matters.
All right. So it was pleasure speaking with you, Mayur. With this, we don't have any more questions for you. So in case any of our participants have any questions, please feel free to write to me at vikas@aifpms.com, or if you would like to know more about, one second, there is one question. So what we'll do is Devanji will answer this question separately for you. After this call, we'll call you. Okay, yeah. So thank you so much once again. Thank you, Mayur, for joining in, taking the time out from your busy schedule and joining and answering all the questions so patiently. So thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Vikas ji. I hope I have been able to answer to most of your queries to your satisfaction. Still, if any one of you are thinking to have a one-to-one kind of a dialogue or conversation, if you think this proposition makes sense for you, you can get in touch with Vikas ji, and Vikas ji can connect to us, and we can make you comfortable with this particular piece.
Certainly. All right. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you, Deepak ji. Thank you, everyone. Yeah.